What's going on, everybody? Jackson Fuller here, and you are listening to the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic on Monday, April 1st. It's April Fool's, but there is no joking when we say that I'm just putting up all the brooms in my closet because Arkansas baseball completed its sweep over LSU this weekend, the number one team in the country, making a massive statement. And it was an exciting weekend overall on the Hill because the Arkansas football team held an open scrimmage where the fans and media could attend. Hutch and I were both there, and we will have a recap from you from both the baseball diamond at Bob Walker Stadium and the football field inside Donald W. Reynolds. Let's bring Hutch in, play that rock music, and get the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic started. What's up, Hutch? Real quick, let's get it started with the question on the mouth, on the lips of everyone. Is it time to buy tickets to buy hotels in Omaha, Nebraska for that 2-week stretch in June?
I mean, it's sure looking good, but you just never know. Baseball is a fickle sport, fickle game. We saw that in 2021 when they were the number one team in the country almost all year, and ended up not going so well. Got knocked out in the Super Regionals. So you just never know. So I think Arkansas fans are going to be at some point rooting for them to lose, just so they can get stop being number one. If they're just number two, that's fine. But I think all Arkansas fans do not want that number one overall seed because it seems to be cursed.
Maybe it's time to break some curses. I don't know. I think this has been such a great start to the season, but there's just been something about the start. I think that's kind of I don't know. It's not really held me back from excitement, but I've been waiting to see a weekend like this, a weekend like the one we just had, where everything kind of got put together. They went out and beat a real high quality opponent. They did some things they haven't really been able to do this year, and we can touch on that. But this was a statement victory, and I'm a little confused by the lack of maybe hype that I feel coming out of it. It feels kind of ho hum, and I think that is really a good sign for Arkansas. You know, for me, I'm just kind of like, oh, they just swept their biggest rival. I know LSU's now after this weekend having a really tough season so far, but I mean, it was impressive as heck to watch this team just like go about their business. They didn't, they pitched it well, they hit well, they fielded it tremendously. Really, there can be zero complaints coming into this week, right? For the baseball team, there's nothing to complain about.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to complain about a sweep over a top 10 team like LSU. Like you said, LSU's maybe not, I think they're now, 2-7 in conference play. So, not vintage LSU, but still that is a high quality, weekend for Arkansas. I personally was most impressed by that game 3, falling behind early, looking like, LSU's going to maybe, steal a game, salvage a game, but you punch right back and tie it up and then end up winning and hanging on at the very end. So that was very impressive to finish after already having the series clinched. They went out and finished off the sweep. But that was really, really, really impressive.
And for me, the most impressive thing was Friday night beating Luke Holman, and I think look, I left that game thinking that maybe Luke Holman is a really terrific college pitcher, but I think that he's maybe not in that A1 tier like a Hagen Smith, right? And gosh, I'm trying to think of other names across like a Chase Burns, even though I know Wake Forest is struggling this year. I just don't think the stuff is that elite A1, first round MLB draft pick stuff. But he entered the night 5-1 with a 0.78 ERA, and Arkansas chased him after 4 1/3 innings. They walked a ton, they hit balls hard, and that was kind of my question for this offense. Was I had a pretty good feeling they could do enough against the average to above average pitchers in the SEC. And when I say do enough, I mean compared to what they need from their pitching staff, because their pitching staff is so good. But I was concerned about when they faced an ace, kind of like, Aiden May was shutting them down when they played Oregon State until he got lifted from the game. The Oklahoma State pitcher shut them down in that, the Saturday in Arlington. They had some struggles against Auburn's number one. to do what they did against Holman, to win that game, pitching Molina. DVH said it doesn't mean anything more special to do it. Your number 2 against their ace. Maybe inside the locker room, to all the Arkansas fans, that was a huge feather in the cap to beat Holman. And I mean, the offense really does seem like, I think it's turning a corner. And I just would like to get your thoughts. I wrote an article that came out this morning, kind of my 3 biggest reasons why the offense is turning a corner. I've got one in particular that I'm really, excited about for the Arkansas baseball team. I'm just curious, from your perspective, what have you seen from the offense over the last couple of weeks that's maybe led to better play overall?
I think having Peyton Stovall back has been just vital. I mean, I know that's more than just a couple of weeks at this point, but the struggles were really prevalent early in the season before he returned to the lineup, and he has really kind of solidified. He's locked down that leadoff spot. I think he's hitting like 360 something now. I think he's been even better in SEC play, hitting like 380 or something crazy like that. He's got some power. We're finally seeing the Peyton Stovall that we all thought he was going to be when he, turned down $2 million to come play at Arkansas. So I think that having him healthy has been just massively important. That's what Dave Van Horn said beforehand, wherever the offense was struggling, and he never hit the panic button. He's like, well, we got Peyton coming back. And lo and behold, that's kind of, how it's played out.
Yeah, real quick on that. That was one of the things I talked about in the story. Peyton's now, he leads the team in batting average, slugging, and on base percentage. And he's pretty high up there in the RBIs category as well, even though he's played about 12 fewer games than the everyday starters like McLaughlin and Aloy and Diggs and stuff. He's been terrific at the top of the lineup. For me, one of the biggest things I think that's changed is the 2 transfers that were Aloy was a locked-on starter at shortstop, but I think Hudson White and Ty Wilmsmeyer were projected starters, but there was a debate about a potential position battle. But if you asked Dave Van Horn before the season and he gave you an honest answer, I think he would have said the best case scenario is White and Wilmsmeyer winning those jobs. And both those guys kind of struggled out of the gate. Now they're not lighting the world on fire, but they're doing their job. I mean, Hudson White had the game-winning double, the walk-off on Friday. Wilmsmeyer had a terrific Sunday with 3 RBIs and, made some great defensive plays in center field. I think those 2 guys coming to life, especially Wilmsmeyer hitting in the 9 hole, and now White, you're seeing him kind of slowly creep up in the batting order, especially against lefties. I think he might have hit cleanup or 5th on Saturday. I think those 2, their emergence is really going to make the entire lineup better, and it's something that they didn't have those guys producing early in the year, and now the most important part of the season, those guys have started to come to life.
And you knew it was coming too, especially with Hudson White. I mean, he's had 2 years of production in the Big 12 at Texas Tech, and so you knew it was going to come. I was a little bit more concerned about Wilmsmeyer. His track record of success is not quite as long. He's played longer, played 3 years in Missouri, but really it was only that last year at Missouri where he hit over 300. But the fact he did it in the SEC has to be like, okay, he's got it in there. And Dave Van Horn always said, our center fielder he's gonna hit more. And lo and behold, he had a really, really good weekend. I mean, you said he was really good on Saturday, but I think he had an RBI in each game, at least a hit in each game. I mean, he was tremendous this weekend. Just from top to bottom, hitting the ball, using his speed defensively. He was awesome. So that was really, really good to see, because I was starting to wonder if maybe he was going to be an everyday starter. Maybe they put Will Edmondson in center or something like that, or Ross Lovich or something. But hopefully for him, he's maybe started getting it going and is going to maybe not be quite as productive each weekend, but be solid down there in that 9 hole.
Yeah, he scored a run and drove in a run in all 3 games out of the 9 hole. Really, the entire bottom of the lineup was pretty good this entire weekend for Arkansas, and that's a huge development for them. Nolan Souza maybe struggled a little bit when he got his lone start on Friday night, but this team is just starting. They're starting to get contributions from everywhere, and they kind of had those contributions filtering in from throughout the lineup earlier in the season, but it wasn't as meaningful as what we kind of have been seeing recently, with White walking off and Wilmsmeyer's terrific day, terrific weekend overall. So, of course, we're starting with the hitting, but the backbone of this team is the pitching staff. And I mean, Hagen Smith on Thursday night was incredible. I know he gave up the 2 home runs. One of them, I think, gets out every single night. One of them maybe helped by the wind, or just didn't get not a true bomb, I guess. But hey, it's a home run nonetheless. I mean, he gave up the 2 bombs, and I think there was a little shock in the crowd, but still 6 innings. To only give up 2 solo home runs is pretty effective. I think DVH will take that for the most part. I'm still waiting for Hagen to get a 7 or 8 inning performance out of him. Maybe that's just wishful thinking on my part because of the way he pitches. The pitch count does tend to get up there, but I mean, if he's going to go out there and throw like he did this weekend, every single game 1 in the SEC, Arkansas is going to be in a terrific position in every single game 2 and game 3 the rest of the season. And it's really that simple with Hagen Smith kind of leading the way, this pitching staff. Everyone around him is terrific too, but he's kind of the catalyst for everything.
Yeah, he's been just incredible. I mean, he's got a 1.54 ERA now. He's up to 72 strikeouts in 35 innings. So he's still averaging more than 2 strikeouts an inning. Opponents are hitting 136 against him. I mean, those are just stupid numbers. Like that's just crazy how good and consistent he's been. I know it would be nice to see a 7-inning start from him, and I think we will eventually. But I don't know if we're going to get to a point where it's 7 innings every single start, because, like you said, the pitch count does elevate a little bit especially when you're getting that many strikeouts, and plus the SEC, it's tough to just strike guys out. Like, I mean, he did against Oregon State, who's remarkable. So, but it's been really, really fun to watch him pitch, because that's really kind of set them up, as you said, for the weekends, with guys like Will McIntyre, Gabe Gackle out of the pen, and especially if you can get Brady Tygart going, maybe that's the biggest negative from this weekend. Then they're going to be sitting really, really pretty.
Yeah, I said there's no negatives, but Brady Tygart's performance is a little concerning this weekend, from my vantage point, because he had struggled with the walks in his previous 2 starts. The walks weren't really there this weekend, so he got the ball over the plate more, and LSU kind of hammered him when he did. I think it's smart for Dave to move Brady to the Saturday or the game 3 spot. I don't think that's going to change even when Arkansas does maybe get back to a Friday, Saturday, Sunday series. I don't know when the next one of those is. This weekend's against Ole Miss is not. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I just think if Mason Molina is very, very much likely to pitch deeper into games than Brady Tygart, he needs to be your number 2 guy, so you can keep as much of the bullpen available as possible going into the game 3. So we'll see. I think DVH he's still expressing confidence in Tygart. I don't think there's an obvious option to replace him in the weekend rotation, and I don't think there's a need to replace him in the weekend rotation just yet. It's been 3 kind of struggling starts, but Arkansas is 2-1 in those starts, and he hasn't picked up a loss. He didn't pick up the loss in the one when Arkansas fell to Auburn last weekend, Arkansas won that game that he pitched against Auburn. So sorry, I'm getting confused there. I tend to do that when thinking about games 1 and 2 and 3 on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So, but all that being said, I think that Mason Molina has kind of earned himself that number 2 spot, and the pitching staff is, even with Tigert struggling, is still the best pitching staff in the country, and a lot of that's because of Will McIntyre. I mean, I know you were around last year, and you knew the legend of Will McIntyre. Did you expect this kind of season from him, or has this even exceeded a little bit of what we thought he could be?
I think he's exceeded the expectations a little bit, but I had pretty high expectations for him anyways. I know his numbers last year didn't look great, but it's kind of a little bit deceiving because they started him out as a starter, then they moved him to the bullpen, and when he was in the bullpen, typically he was kind of piggybacking off of Brady Tygart as they were working him back from his injury. He was really good, really, really good, and it was the kind of the Will McIntyre that we saw previously. He's had kind of a very interesting career because he pitched a little bit in 2020 before COVID hit. Then he redshirted in 21 despite looking really good. Then he didn't pitch for the first half of the 22 season. Then he starts pitching. He's like a key arm on that run to the College World Series. Had a huge start in Omaha. Then last year, they start him out in the rotation. He struggles, mightily. And then they move him to the bullpen, and he starts becoming really good again. And so it's just been a very wild, up and down, all over the place kind of career for him. And for him to put it all together has been awesome. I had basic conversations with Matt Hobbs before the season, and hearing what Dave Van Horn had to say, I was like, okay, this guy's going to be pretty good. He's going to be their guy that they count on, multiple times. Like the role that he's had this year has not surprised me at all because I knew that was what it was going to be. But how effective he's been in it has been probably, a nice little surprise because no one expects a guy to come in and have the numbers that he does. I mean, I think Jay Johnson said that he's got video game numbers. And I mean, he really does. I mean, 193 ERA, 41 strikeouts to only 6 walks and 32 and 2/3 innings, holding teams under 200 batting average. That's that's pretty good if you have a guy like that can pitch twice on a weekend.
Yeah, and not only can he pitch twice on a weekend, but he can pitch twice in high leverage situations. It's one thing if you trot him back out there, I think, for to start the 6th inning, on a Sunday, and you maybe just give him an inning or two and then turn it over to a different closer. But he came in on Saturday with the bases loaded and 2 outs in a, what was it? It was a 1-run or 2-run game? 2-run game at the time. Gets out of the jam, comes out, pitches the 9th, gets the save. It's just crazy to watch him because he doesn't have that elite college level stuff either. But what he does have is an absolutely disgusting cutter that, lives in the upper 80s and moves from one side of the plate to the other, in on lefties and away from righties. And that's the pitch Mariano Rivera became the best closer on, the best closer of all time. Not saying that McIntyre's cutter is anywhere near that, but if you can successfully throw a cutter, you can have a lot of success in this game, and that's kind of what McIntyre's riding right now. And it's fun to watch because he's got a certain swag about him as well when he talks to us and when he's out there on the field. He feels like he belongs with the best pitchers in the country, and he probably does right now based off what we've seen.
Yeah, it's been remarkable. It's just such a great story. I mean, I kind of mentioned his journey, and he's an Arkansas kid. He grew up dreaming of playing for the Razorbacks, and now he's living that. That makes it all the better. It's fantastic, and I don't think anyone could have imagined him being a closer in the SEC like he's emerged. I mean, I don't even think his dad, could have thought that. It's just been the most surprising kind of development. But that's what this pitching, this coaching staff can do. I mean, no one thought Kevin Kopps was going to be a closer, much less the greatest relief pitcher in college baseball history, and that's what they turned him into. And obviously, Kevin Kopps and Will McIntyre, they've got a lot of take a lot of credit for that as well. But the coaching staff, I think, deserves some kudos for that as well.
And a conversation for a later day is if we get to a game 4 of a regional or game 5 in Omaha, does Will McIntyre start a game for Arkansas? I would love to be in that situation and see how it plays out. But as I said, a conversation for another day. Before we move on to football, I got 2 shout outs that I want to give for players that maybe flew a little under the radar this weekend. One is Stone Hewlett, the lefty. I mean, came in and got 2 big outs on Thursday and Friday night, respectively. Right? He pitched on Friday, didn't he? Am I making that up? No, he pitched on Friday. He pitched on Thursday. He got the last out both days. He's unhittable to lefties, and that's a weapon for DVH when he gets into. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Dave Van Horn uses him because you don't want to burn him, in the 7th, and then the lefty comes up in the bottom of the 9th with the bases loaded and you don't have him available. But he's done his job so far this season, which is get lefties out. And then secondly is Kendall Diggs. I know he didn't have, the greatest series overall this weekend, but his 2-run homer or was it 2 or a 3-run homer, Hutch, that he hit in the 8th? It was a
It was a
three, yeah,
three-run homer.
3-run. His 3-run homer proved to be the difference, in that game because LSU came out and scored another run in the 9th inning. So it's just those are the moments I think that it's a clutch moment, and your best, either your first or second best hitter came through and delivered, when you absolutely needed him to. And I think, not the best weekend, but he'll have better weekends, and just good to see him coming through in the clutch like that. Anybody from you maybe we haven't mentioned so far that you feel like deserves a tip of the cap after wrapping up the LSU weekend?
Well, I've been on the Will Edmondson train since before the season, so I guess I got to give him some love for going 3 for 3. Had a double, a walk, a stolen base, scored a run or two in the finale. So it looks like he maybe potentially is making a move to lock down that job in left field. We thought it was Ross Lovich making a move and locking it down. Then here comes Will Edmondson. So I'll give him a shout out. And I want to echo your sentiments about Stone Hewlett too, because this was a guy when he committed. I remember texting a couple of my buddies going, "Who is this guy? Like, what? Why is he? Why is Arkansas going after this mediocre reliever from Kansas? I'm confused. What's going on here?" And Dave said, "Well, if you look at his numbers, he's really good against lefties." And I looked at his numbers. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I'm like, okay, they're solid against lefties, but maybe not spectacular to where it's like, oh my god, this guy's incredible. But I guess they just saw something on film, and they saw something in the process. They're like, if we truly buy into dedicating him to being a left on left specialist, which at Kansas he was just a normal bullpen arm, pitching in all scenarios, whatever. But they truly were like, okay, we're gonna pitch him against lefties, and now he's virtually unhittable, as you were saying. So. That is a incredible identification and execution of the plan by the Arkansas coaching staff, because no one could have seen him being as effective as he has whenever he committed.
Yeah, and I think I haven't been here long, but I think that's one of the most impressive things that's jumped out at me about about the baseball program is their ability to not only get high quality talent to Fayetteville, but then to develop that high quality talent, and maybe some of the not elite guys that they bring in, they can still develop them and turn them into quality SEC contributors, especially the pitchers, like a Stone Hewlett, a Will McIntyre, and such. And I mean, it makes you think about, the potential for a Gabe Gackle, a Hunter Dietz when they start developing. Cool to see Hunter pitch this weekend. And look, if DVH has the trust to give him his first college, appearance against the best hitter in the country in Tommy White, that shows me all I need, that this guy is legit and he's going to be a big factor as we head down the stretch of this season. So Arkansas hosts Central Arkansas on Tuesday night, and then a 3-game series against Ole Miss, who is coming off a weekend sweep at the hands of Kentucky. So the Rebels will be desperate. But gotta say, I like Arkansas in that weekend series. We'll see when Ole Miss comes to town. Let's jump over to football, Hutch, and let's talk 10 minutes here real quick about what we saw at this open spring scrimmage on Saturday. I'll start. I think Taylen Green's final numbers were, not great. 10 for 23. He did throw an interception. He had a couple that were dropped. But I am not going to read too much into what I see from Taylen Green statistically until I think the biggest weapon of Taylen Green's is his legs. And we're just not seeing that really, come out in full force in these practice-like scenarios, these scrimmages. He did have a couple big runs, but nobody's really allowed to tackle him. I think he even, sometimes is sitting in the pocket and is like, this would be a run situation, but because it's a scrimmage and, because no one's tackling me and I'm going to throw it. I think when we get to the regular season and, he can start using his legs more and we can see how it really bears out in live tackling situations, that's when we're going to really be able to tell whether this guy can can be a special quarterback for Arkansas. Of course, unfortunately, that's not until the games start. But I think there's something there that the full like ceiling of his talent really isn't going to come out until the regular season.
And I think the same thing could have been said back wherever before KJ Jefferson was a starting quarterback, because we saw it a little bit in the practices and scrimmages. We're like, okay, we don't know how this guy's going to be, and then get him in a game and he's trucking dudes and having guys bounce off of him, and you're like, oh my god, this guy's incredible. I think it's a very similar situation with Taylen Green. I mean, Jalen Braxton basically said as such after the scrimmage, like, man, I can't wait until he is live and we actually get to see him run, because I think he's got a lot of potential there. I think he's got more speed than KJ Jefferson, just based on there was a play where he had he was flushed out of the pocket, turned the corner on I think it was like 3rd and 9, and he picked up 7 because he was able to beat I think Nico DeVilliers to the edge, something like that. So it was. And it was a legit run too. Like, I don't think that he would have been caught. I think he truly did beat the guys to the edge, and so we've seen a little bit, like glimpses of it, like you're saying, and we haven't really seen it all the way to the full potential. And plus, another thing I would caution fans before they freak out about the 10 for 23 is he was without Andrew Armstrong, who is clearly one of his top 2 targets from the spring. He did have Tyrone Broden, who's the other one, but without Andrew Armstrong out there, I just don't think you can really truly say how good he is. And plus, he also, Jaden Wilson, say what you want about him, he's competing for a starting job. He also wasn't in there. So a couple of key targets down, and as you said, not able to use his legs. So we're not really seeing the full, Taylen Green in these scrimmages.
Yeah. And even the 10 for 23, I think we're going to see some similar numbers to that in the regular season. Like, he's not a hyper accurate quarterback. He wasn't at Boise State. That was the concern when he came here. I think Bobby Petrino, the offense looked incredible on Saturday, at least compared to what we saw from Dan Enos. So, that's the only takeaway I'm going to have about Bobby Petrino this year. It was better than Dan Enos. No, he's not. I don't think he's going to be ever a high efficiency, high completion percentage quarterback, but if he can make explosive plays, if he can pick up first downs with his legs, and if he can, be a threat with his legs, that opens up the run game for the running backs, which I think KJ Jefferson had last year, that threat, but the offensive line was so bad, it kind of negated it. For me, that was my biggest takeaway, is the offensive line held up. There were sacks. I think there were 5 sacks. The first team defensive line caused some havoc in the backfield. We had some negative plays, but for the most part, the offensive line held up. Taylen Green wasn't being pressured every single time, and he wasn't, running for his life on every play. However, there was still a struggle with some blitzes. It seems like when this defense under Travis Williams schemes up some disguised blitzes and linebackers, stunting and everything, the offensive line is still struggling a little bit with that. And I think that's something to watch over the next couple weeks of spring camp before the spring game.
I'd say that's fair, but I also think that this defensive line is, it's not Alabama, it's not Georgia, but it is above average, in my opinion, above average SEC defensive line. With Landon Jackson coming back, I think I've been really impressed with Nico this spring. I think he's been kind of one of those breakout guys. Been really impressed with him. I think Cam Ball is an excellent, defensive tackle. Eric Gregory's been here forever. That's a pretty good starting group right there, and I think some of the other guys that they have potential. I like Quincy Rhodes' potential. Anton Junkaj, he's a guy that I think can really rush the passer. There's been some question about whether or not he can defend the run, but he had a couple of tackles for loss in the scrimmage, including one that was in the red zone that stopped a red zone possession by the offense. So he seems to be improving as well. So it seems to me like they've got a pretty good defensive line. So that helps. Plus, I mean, Travis Williams' defense, that was the big selling point when Sam Pittman hired him before last season, was like, this guy rushes the passer. He's going to get after the quarterback. And we saw it a little bit last year, but I think they're going to really dial it up some more this year. And so that's why maybe it's a little bit harder for everybody to pick up those blitzes. Of course, that's looking at everything through my rose-colored glasses.
Yeah, it's just something I think that it's going to be really hard to tell how much this offensive line has improved until we get to that second week of the season and they're playing at Oklahoma State. I mean, we're going to have to just take everything else with a grain of salt. I think there's obvious signs of improvement, but they were one of the worst offensive lines in the country last year. They need to be average this year. We'll see if they can get there. And, maybe they can exceed those expectations and be a really good, productive offensive line in the SEC. I'm a little skeptical about that still, but I'm willing to be convinced. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen until the year starts. Real quick, Hutch, before we get out of here, listeners, we both have a busy Mondays today. What was your biggest takeaway from the scrimmage, or a person, a player that stood out to you? Maybe we've already talked about it, and you can dive into your bag for your second biggest takeaway or person. But just what would give us one lasting thought from the scrimmage this Saturday?
Yeah, I think Isaiah Satania is finally going to have his breakout year. I just have really liked what I've seen from him all spring. He had a really nice scrimmage. He got open on a deep ball that Taylen Green put right on the money. Just seems to get open. I mean, I think he had like 83 receiving yards or something, and that didn't include a pass that was wiped out because of an illegal man downfield penalty. You throw that in there, he probably has 100 yards in a scrimmage, which is pretty hard to do. So I really liked what I saw from Isaiah Satania. I think now that he has a competent offensive coordinator in Bobby Petrino, he's got to figure out ways to get him the ball.
Good stuff. Mine is that I think both freshmen offensively are going to play and right away. I think C.J. Brown and Braylon Russell both bring something that this team needs. I think C.J. is competing with Satania. They're both slot receivers, but they're very different slot receivers. Satania is more of like a burner, get the ball to him in space. He can beat guys downfield. I think C.J. Brown is already one of the better route runners on the team. He creates easy separation, and he can make some tough catches, along the sideline. He had a really nice catch in the corner of the end zone during the scrimmage that, he was out of bounds, but it was more the quarterback kind of led him out of bounds. I think it was a very contested catch he came down with. And Braylon Russell, the man's got tree trunks for legs. He's hard to tackle. When they get inside the red zone, now I will say there is some times where the defensive line beats him and gets into the backfield and he can't, use that strength and that speed. But if they can get him in space where he can get a little head of steam going, it's really hard to bring him down. And so I think those two guys are going to make an impact right away for this team, which is great because this recruiting class was not supposed to be a good recruiting class, in terms of national ranking and everything. But if you've got two freshmen offensively who can contribute right away, that's a huge success in the recruiting, in the wars of recruiting.
Yeah, I almost said Braylon Russell because he trucked a dude in the scrimmage. That was really impressive to see. And I'm anxious to see him again running behind that first team offensive line, because as you said, there were a couple times, but I think it was with the threes, and the third defensive line definitely beat the third offensive line in that scrimmage. So very, very anxious to see what he could do with surrounded by other starters.
Yeah. We're going to go, but I'll say this, Hutch. Our homework assignment for next week's podcast is at the next scrimmage on Saturday. Let's get some defensive nuggets. Let's watch the defense, because I think we talked a lot about the offense, but I think those are the biggest question marks for this team. Is the offense has to be better, but we'll bring some defensive notes to next week's podcast, and we'll also be discussing a 3-game series against Ole Miss. So thank you guys so much for listening. We apologize if it's a little shorter episode than normal, but still, hey, 35 minutes, good talk. Not much to say about the baseball team when they, just go and beat the brakes off of their biggest rival, right? It's only praise we can give. So, Hutch, thank you so much for joining me. As always, I will see you very soon, and we will be back here next Monday for the next episode of Hoggin the Mic. Thank you guys so much for listening.